All right, thank you for everybody that watched the unboxing of this video. Here is the STRICH SSTS10 again. We're gonna go ahead and break down what's going on with this guitar, figure out what the specs are, and then see what it needs. So I haven't really played the guitar too much. I unboxed it this morning. I've let it sit for a few hours while I was teaching some classes. And the only thing I noticed was the fifth fret low E is pretty dead. Here, let me actually do something real quick if I can. Let's turn off noise suppression here. So you guys can hear, hopefully, just how buzzy that fifth fret is. Other than that, though, everything else seemed to sound pretty good. The frets themselves, I usually would have to polish heavily in order to get any sort of grittiness out, but other than that fret buzzing, the frets feel pretty smooth under my fingers, so that's good news. I can't remember the last time I had a beginner guitar that felt pretty smooth. They do look slightly tarnished, so I would still recommend polishing them, but the level of polishing is so much easier when they're already smooth. It's just a matter of cleaning them up. So let's go ahead and get a top-down view of the guitar real quick. Okay, so here's the guitar. Again, it's straight out of the box. This is still the original strings. Everything seems pretty good. I did check the fret, the nut height, sorry, and it does seem a little high, especially on D and G. The other strings seem pretty good, maybe a tad higher than I would want, but for like straight from the factory, not bad. It's the D and the E that are definitely a bit of a struggle. And yes, I am checking it laying down because it's a little bit easier to show that for you guys. I know that I should be checking this while it's in my lap, which I've already done. So what we're going to do is we're going to check the action height for all the strings. The saddles look like they're pretty much how I would want them set as far as like radius goes, although I don't know the radius of the neck yet. And everything else seems pretty good. And actually something that I wanted to do was compare this to STRICH's listing on Amazon to see how accurate they are on their measurements. This is something that you notice a lot with beginner guitars, is that the measurements from the manufacturer differ from what actually gets handed to you. And that's just because usually a company like STRICH is working with a manufacturer. They're not actually manufacturing themselves. I don't know if that's the case or not for them specifically, but it is different. So again, this is a red guitar. It came in a starter kit. It's called Metal Red. It came with the amp, a capo, strings, a strap, a tuner, a cleaning cloth, and a gig bag, as well as a cable to plug the guitar into the amp. None of that stuff, I'm not worried about any of that stuff for testing. I'll probably do a separate video on the amp, just because I believe they also sell it separately, but the guitar is the heart of everything. If the guitar doesn't play well, it doesn't really matter how well any of that stuff does, unless you could buy it separately. So we're going to check the guitar now. I have the listing up here, so I just want to see if they do list any of the specs, so I can see what it's going to be, but it doesn't look like they really do have anything listed here. So I guess we'll find out for the first time here. So first up, I'm just going to check neck relief. There's no specific measurement I have for this. I'm not measuring the neck relief as a fine number. I just want to see how much there is. And for me, I typically like my necks almost dead on straight, with a little bit of relief sometimes. In this case, there is a little bit of relief in the center. I can see a gap between the bottom of my straight edge through to like the other side of the room. So that means that the fifth fret issue where it's buzzing is either that the fret is high or it's kind of come out a little bit, which happens a lot in the weather change when it's dry and humid and dry and humid. The wood contracts and expands. Now, I saw somebody mention that the wood is supposed to be, or the fretboard is supposed to be a composite material. I haven't looked through the listing enough to know that. Looking at the grain, though, I would say that is correct. It does look like a composite material, which is pretty interesting. That means that theoretically the frets shouldn't be moving out of the material. And if I look at the fifth fret, it does look like it's seated properly, which means I'm sorry, the 6th fret's the one that's buzzing. It's at the 5th fret. So the 6th fret does actually look a little bit higher out of the slot in the neck. So it could just be that it needs to be tapped in, or it could be high. We're going to find out right now if it's high. Okay, if it's high, it could still just need to be tapped in. If not, it'll need to be sanded. So I have a fret rocker here from Music Nomad. This is also what I'll use to measure the action. So if I play the 5th fret, it's buzzing against the 6th. So I need to measure from 5 to 7. And oh yeah, there's a lot of rock in there. Like, I don't know if you can hear that. But this is not sitting flat. So there is some issue for sure on that. So I'll kind of show you from here real quick. It's not sitting flush. It's pretty normal for some of the frets to be a tad higher or lower. This amount of buzz, I would call that a dead fret. I haven't checked any of the other frets, but just playing around. They all sound pretty good. So I'm going to just go ahead and measure the action height. So for that, I'm going to bring the guitar up here so you guys can see. Again, trying to hold it in more of a playing position. At the 12th fret of low E, we're sitting at about 2 millimeters of relief. A is sitting at about 2.25. D at about 2.5. G is also at about 2.5. I know it's hard for you guys to see, but I need to see as well. B is at about 2.5. And then high E is about 2.25. So low E again is at 2. And high E is 2.25, which is usually the opposite of what you want. Usually you'll have high E be a little bit lower and low E be a little bit higher. So I'm just going to go ahead and I have a little like sheet for the specs out of the box. I'm going to go ahead and fill that out. It'll be available for you guys in the description below. If you want to get one of these guitars to check out for yourself, STRICH provided me with a link you can also use to get the guitar. It's going to be down below too. It's not an affiliate link. I don't get paid for it. They sent me the guitar. That was the link they provided when they told me they were going to send the guitar. So again, 2.25 millimeters on high E and 2.2 millimeters, on low E. Neck relief, there definitely is some. I don't have a specific measurement. I can kind of check that now. Like I said, there's probably more relief than I would want, but some people like a little more relief and a lower action. I like a very straight neck, so I will level every single fret on the guitar if I have to get very low action. So here we have feeler gauge. So we should be at about 6 thousandths. 0.15 millimeters. I don't know why I'm trying to do inches. I never do inches. Okay, so we want about 0.15 millimeters at the 6th fret, and that is about what we have. So that's pretty good. Let's check the high E2. And again, that is pretty much dead on where we want it. So from the factory, it does seem like most places do a setup like that, and it provides pretty good results. Occasionally, like I said, frets will be off. So I'm going to go ahead and close this up. All right, so we have, again, neck relief at 0.15 millimeters. It's not bad. Nut slot height is a different story. Like I said, it seems a little high, especially on D and G. So our low E and A string we want at about 0.5 millimeters. So I'm going to press down on the 3rd fret here. Actually, it's a little low on low E, which is good. That's something I noticed when I was first picking it up. I thought it was a little lower and pretty good. So I think it's pretty good on A as well. All right, D and G should be about 0.45 millimeters. So there's definitely some extra space between the D string and some extra space on the G string as well. Not by a whole lot, but they're definitely a little high. And then high E and B, we want it sitting around 0.4 millimeters. So let's do high E first. And that one's pretty good. And B is just a tad higher. But all in all, still pretty good results. D and G being higher is also pretty normal, but a slight filing of the nut slot should fix that. Not that it's necessary. If you're playing and it's in tune, other than your bar chords being a little bit more difficult, that's not something that's going to deter a very first beginner. Usually when I get guitars for students that I set up, I want to make sure that I don't have to ever touch that guitar again. So I make sure the nut is cut pretty much as perfect as it can be so that when they start playing bar chords, it's not difficult. But I do a hammer-on test for each of the first frets. A and E I can do pretty easily. For D, I have to really slam the finger through the string. Same for G. B almost gets it. And high E almost gets it. So pretty much E and A are where we'd want, and then those two are a little bit higher. Now, again, those strings were also a little bit higher in height for the action, so that could also be causing something. I'm going to go ahead and take the strings off, and we're going to measure. We're going to measure the thickness of the neck at the 1st fret and the 12th fret. So let's go ahead. I'm going to speed through that. Let me grab a string winder real quick. Got to make sure I have all the tools ready, and I completely forgot string winder. Okay. I will say the way they wrap these strings is pretty good. Most of the time you get tons and tons of wraps on these strings from the manufacturer, and it's unnecessary. Okay, strings are off. That was pretty painless. Let's go ahead and get that measurement for the neck. I think this neck is a little thicker than pretty much any neck I have here. It probably is closest to my bass neck, to be honest. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's just an observation. So let's go ahead and measure the height between the for the neck at the 1st fret. So turn this on. Okay, again, everything I do is in millimeters, so I'm going to go 1st fret. Make sure I keep it straight. Okay. So I like to lock it in place and then check. So we're looking at about 22.73 millimeters. So just so you guys know, I'm going to type all this into that sheet I was mentioning. So where is that measure? I'm not even seeing that measurement right now. 1st fret. I got to add it in. It's not there. Let's add it in. Insert one row below. Neck thickness. 1st fret. Okay, again, that was 22.73 millimeters. And we have neck thickness at the 12th fret. Okay, so let's go ahead and get that now. This is pretty hard to do on camera, not gonna lie. Let's go back here since I'm. There we go. Lock it in place. Usually a 12th fret's a little bit thicker. Okay. So we're looking at 24.77, so just about 2 millimeters thicker. Almost exactly 2 millimeters thicker. Okay, there is no binding on this. Let's go ahead and figure out how wide the nut is. If I had to guess, I'd say 40 millimeters, maybe 42. Somewhere in there. It's usually what it is, but I'm going to guess 40. So let's see. Ooh, it was 42. 42.26. And the nut is a little wider than the neck, so we're going to say the neck is really 42. So I'm just going to mark that as 42 millimeters. All right, scale length. I already kind of measured when I did the straight edge there. It's 25.5 inches, like a Strat. That's the only one I do in inches, by the way. Everything else, well, I do the radius as well in inches, but everything else I typically do in millimeters. Just so much easier for some reason. I don't know if it's because most of the manufacturers are making them their guitars using millimeters, but all right. So here we have some radius gauges. We're going to go ahead and figure out what the radius of the neck is. Let's go ahead and switch back down. Oop, not piano. There we go. To the neck. Most Strats are 9.5 inches. This looks flatter. If I had to guess just by looking at it, I think it's probably like a 16, but I'm not sure. So here we have a 9.5. There's a gap underneath. I can see some light shining through. So it's definitely not 9.5. It's flatter than that. Let's try a 10. I can still see some light shining through, so it's not that. Let's try a 12. And 12 looks like it might be it. I'll go ahead and just use my phone here to shine some light through it. Nope, I can still see a gap, so it's not 12. Let's see, what other options do I have? 14. Oh, that might be it. 14 looks a little bit more like it. 14, let's check 15. 15, and check 16. I think I was right the first time. Looks like it might be a 16. Just check from this angle. Yep, we got a 16-inch radius. Now, this again, personal preference, but typically the flatter the radius, the easier it is to set up the guitar well and not have issues. So probably made life a little bit easier on them in manufacturing and didn't really hurt anybody's feelings. So that's good. Again, I'm just going to put this in the sheet here. So we have a 16-inch fingerboard radius. Okay, and let's see. Bridge type is trem. We're going to measure the tuning machine ratio now. This is something that a lot of people pay a lot of attention to on guitars, is how many rotations of the key does it take to get one rotation of this. Very common, like good quality tuner will typically be like 18 to 1 or higher. Most of the time when you get something like this, it's usually between 10 to like 12. So we'll see where it's at. So right now the peg is here. I'm going to turn the key. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So it's somewhere about 14 or 15. I'm going to say it's a 14 to 1. This is better to err on the cautionary side. So we have a 14 to 1 ratio on the tuning machine ratio. Okay, there's a 5-way switch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 1 volume and 2 tones. Pickup is a single coil for every single one. Okay. String gauge. The pack that came with the guitar was 9 to 42. I'm going to assume that is also what this is. So let me just zero this out. So let me find that. Low E. it's measuring at about 4 thousandths. So that is pretty close to what we would imagine a 42 would be. And this is 9. Okay, so yeah, 9 to 42. That is absolutely correct. String gauge 9 to 42. When I restring this guitar, I will put 10s on it just because that's what I have, or maybe I'll use their 9s, who knows. I also have a really old set of Fender bullet 9s, the ones that don't have the ball end, but instead like the little bullet shaped end. They are probably about 16, maybe 15 years old. Nut slot height, I don't have an exact measurement for that. The tool I used was just for estimating. I will actually set all the slots to about 3 thousandths or 5 thousandths of an inch when the guitar is set up. Let's see what else we need. So there is no top. Neck profile I would call chunky C. It's going to be more accustomed to the earlier Strats, less than a modern Strat. So yeah, it's very, very chunky. Neck wood appears to be some sort of maple. I don't know if their listing says anything. Let's see. So it says the body is poplar, the neck is maple, the fretboard is technical wood. Yep. Okay. So I'm inclined to believe that the neck is some sort of technical wood based on that. I can't prove poplar or not without looking a little bit closer at the wood, and even then it's just a guess. But I would say that that's probably accurate. The model, again, is SSTS10. Is there a serial number on this? I don't think I saw one. No serial number. Or if there is, it's not there. It doesn't even say made in China anywhere or anything. Which I'm assuming these are made in China based on the price point, but I don't see that specifically. We'll probably take the neck off to check. Gig bag was included. Finish is a gloss red metal. Body type is S. Oh gosh, can't spell. Okay, I think that covers everything we want to know. And weight. Weight is usually something people want to know. All right, for this I'm going to have to grab a scale, so bear with me. I'll come right back. All right, so as you can see, I brought a scale with me now. I'm going to go ahead and just lift the guitar up here. Move this out of the way because we don't want any of the guitar supported. Go ahead and turn that on. Okay, and see where this is at. If I had to guess, I'd say around 7. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'm getting, let's see if I can just kind of move this a little bit. Ooh, hit the whole dang computer. All right, so we're looking at about 7 pounds, 5.7 ounces, which was not too far from what I said. You know, I usually give my opinion on a guitar when I pick it up, and honestly, I would have said it is heavy. But looking at the actual measurement, it's what I guessed, but I'm so used to playing headless guitars now that like 7 pounds just feels awful because everything I play is about 2 pounds lighter than that. So we're at 7 pounds, 5.7 ounces. Okay. And let's see if I can get a nut slot height more accurately than I did before using another tool. Couple things on top of this case. Sorry about that noise. All right. So we don't need the scale anymore. Let me turn that off. Let's get that over here. And let's put... Whew. I'm trying to juggle things, guys. All right. Let's put the guitar here. And what I'm going to use is this little nut slot measuring tool that I bought for setting up guitars, which allows you to measure the nut without having strings on it, which is really nice. So we have 3 thousandths of an inch, 5 thousandths of an inch, 8 thousandths of an inch, and then 0 thousandths of an inch. I can tell you right now, none of those are 0 thousandths of an inch. If I had to guess, I would say the E and the A are probably close to about 5. So what you do is there's a little, don't know if you can tell, but there's a little indent here on each corner. And you put that into the slot, you drag it back, and if you hear a click, it's taller than that. And honestly, there's a big drop on low E. Actually, I must have just had it sitting up, so it's still a little bit taller than 5 thousandths. Maybe it's at 8. Yeah, 8 is fine. The A is taller than 8. The D is taller than 8. G is taller than 8. B is taller than 8. And high E is taller than 8. So E is really the only one that would be cut at 8 thousandths of an inch. Everything else is taller. Can't tell you exactly how much taller, but it is taller. All right. What we're going to do is I'm going to take these strings off completely. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the electronics, see if there's any shielding or anything like that. Just going to go ahead and cut the ends off here. And then the string should push through the back. Yep, we got little holes here on the back. Let's go back to the full camera. So I'm just going to push the strings through. Anybody has trouble pushing these strings through, you're not alone. It is pretty difficult sometimes to get them through, especially the smaller ones because you have less grip on them while you're holding them. So right now I think I was able to get through like a few, but they're not actually coming out the back, which means they're probably getting stuck on that plate. See if I can coerce any of them out without taking the plate off. It's like the last thing I want to do. There we go. There's 1, 2, 3. So I don't like the individual whole back plates like this because it makes it a lot harder to get the strings out. It does look nice, but it isn't functionally better. Looks like high E is really stuck in there. B, I'm unable to rotate out of the way. All right, so what we're going to end up doing is just taking that back plate off. Let's go ahead and set the guitar here again. Go back to top down. All right, so I'm going to need probably this one. Yes, all right. All the tools you'll see me using, by the way, are mostly Music Nomad. If Music Nomad makes it, I usually buy their tools. They just tend to make pretty good tools. By the way, something I want to mention, another thing about guitars like this, and this one specifically, is you'll notice that there's a neck plate. Very common for Strat guitars or Strat style guitars. But what we also see is there's a little black like plastic bushing underneath that. When you make a guitar out of something like poplar, which is a softer wood, it's still technically a hardwood, but it's softer than, say, akume, mahogany, alder, ash, and things like that that you'd usually see on like higher end or nicer guitars, however you want to look at it. What do you call it? It's a good idea to have a bushing like that, even though it might not make the guitar sustain as much, which is usually a big argument against those. What usually happens is it'll dent the wood if you just put the plate on directly. So those spacers help just keep the wood from getting dented in. It could also have to do with like how thick the neck is. Maybe it needs a little bit more spacing between the plate so that the screws don't damage the neck. That I can't tell you without knowing the exact construction process, but typically it's because the wood would get dented. I've had several guitars come in that I've taken those off and nothing bad happened, but it is something to notice. So first thing I'm seeing here is in the rear cavity, we don't have any shielding, which is not super uncommon for a trem cavity. Like shielding is not need to be shielded necessarily, but it is something that we see sometimes. So here the strings are able to come out a little bit better, so I can get those last 3 out of here. And we have a 3-spring system for the trem with a very small block. So let me go ahead and show you guys that block real quick after I wrap up these strings. Oh, that did not work. All right, so you can see the block is very small. Trems on guitars like these typically are not in any way usable. They just tend to go out of tune or get stuck. Your strings get stuck in the nut, so it doesn't move well enough to like stay in tune, or manage the movements very well. Sometimes it snaps strings because they just get bound. So I don't usually recommend setting up trims like this for using the actual bar or anything, but it's fine. First major kind of like quality issue is there's a piece of wood here that's just chipped out, probably from when it was being routed. Again, I say major issue. It's not going to hurt the guitar functionally, just it's a pretty sharp piece of wood chunk. The bridge itself is sitting here fine, the saddles are fine. So like if you have a guitar that like this and it's flat against the body, which most low-end Strats will, you're not going to have issues with that trem typically. But I was noticing when I played it that the trem does make a little bit of spring noise. Not a huge deal, just a personal preference thing again. Okay, so before we actually open the guitar up, before we take the neck off, I want to open the guitar up in the electronics. Just see how the cavity's looking. I'm hoping these screws are the same as the back plate, because I'm going to put them together. Let's see. Yeah, cool. That makes my life a whole lot easier. So let's see what kind of electronics we got. Usually with a guitar of this level, we're going to see some just no-name pickups, some small dime-sized 250K potentiometers for the volume and tone, and then a circuit board 5-way switch. Most of the time, if that is the case, it is not a big deal. All that stuff will last a couple of years before it wears out. And even like the pots and the switch, you can get a little bit more life out of with something like Deoxit, which is a electronic cleaner and lubricant. But I can't really speak to how this guitar is going to last like that because I probably will not have my hands on it for that long. But we can definitely take a look and see if there's anything that's surprising in there. Again, shielding would be nice, but I don't expect it. You just don't really see them on guitars at this price. If you don't know what shielding is, it's essentially either a black conductive paint or sometimes like an aluminum foil type tape that is supposed to help block out any excess signals from electronics from interfering with the pickups in the cavity. So if you've ever noticed like your guitar makes noise from a radio playing nearby, if anybody uses a radio anymore, it's supposed to help with that kind of thing. Does it? I haven't done the scientific testing, and I don't plan on doing it. So maybe find somebody who has, and they'll be able to give you a good answer. I'm trying to be really careful. I don't want to dent any of the screws or anything, but the screwdriver is slipping. The screws are good, but some of the screws are coming out a little crooked, which means that it wasn't screwed in like perfectly straight, which is not a big deal. Again, just a small thing that usually happens, and I've seen it on $1,000, $2,000 Strats before. But it makes just life a little bit easier when they're straight to take off this. And let's face it, most beginners wouldn't be doing this anyway. I'm doing it for beginners to know what they're getting for roughly $150 to $200, depending on the market. So let's go ahead. It's a little bit under the neck, so I'm going to have to slide it back. And it's still a little bit hooked under there. Come on. There we go. Okay. So there's no shielding. There is a little bit of shielding actually around the electronics themselves. We got dime-sized pots that are, they're not labeled. But again, if I had to guess, it's a 250K. 250K is usually what we'd use for single coils. A lot of wood here. It's like they didn't clean it out. There's a lot of buffing compound in here too that didn't get cleaned out. All that's cosmetic. It's not terrible. The switch is a circuit board switch, which honestly, this is one of those things that I'll see in guitars at $100, and I'll see them in guitars that are $600, $700, $800. It's just the quality of the switch sometimes changes. For example, a switch like this is, I'm pretty sure, in that Ibanez guitar right behind me. That guitar is about 4 times the price of this one. Is that switch going to last longer because it's 4 times the price? I don't know. Could be the exact same switch. There's no markings on here to tell me which one this is, and I do not recall off that one. Everything else here looks pretty good. I'm just going to clean away some of this dust from the wood. And some of the wood chippings seem to have like embedded themselves in the paint, which is kind of interesting. So it looks like they like drilled it out, didn't blow it off or anything, and then screwed this into place, and then the wood just got kind of like pressed in. But when you're doing it quick, you know, those are the concessions they make. Okay, everything else there is good. I'll go ahead and put this back in place. Try to get all the wires under. There we go. Okay, that was a lot of fun. I'm going to go ahead and just put a couple of screws in that so it stays in place for the next part, and then I'll do the rest of the screws off camera later, but I want to make sure it stays in place. And then you and we're going to take a look at the neck pocket. We're going to see if we can kind of identify whether or not the body is made of poplar. Body wood is, again, one of those things that's kind of personal preference. If it's painted like this, you're not going to really be able to tell if it's something else, which is probably better. Honestly, cheap guitars that are natural colored or hit or miss. I got really lucky with the one of the guitars back there that I play. It just looks beautiful and it wasn't painted. But you never know. When it's painted like this, you get a lot more consistency, which is also good if you're trying to save money or sell a guitar for a lesser cost. All right, let's go ahead and switch to a bigger screwdriver tip, still Phillips head. We're taking these 4 screws out. All right, sounds crunchy in there. Probably did not clean out the holes here either when they were drilling it. I lied, I'm not gonna use the screwdriver, give me a second. I have an electric screwdriver right here. Let's do this. Okay. 1 down, 3 to go. Two down, 2 to go. One left. All right, so neck is off. Let's go ahead and remove this. Oh yeah, got some wood chip out there too. Like I said, it's just from them not cleaning the holes after they drilled it. We got a plastic recessed like bushing for the neck plate, and then a metal neck plate, which is probably nickel or steel. And then we have our neck, which is a pretty good snug fit into the guitar. I'm gonna take this down here because I'm gonna have to pull it. Oh gosh, it's actually really tight, which is good for sustain, right? All right, so the neck doesn't appear it was stained or anything based on the holes on the inside. I don't know if you guys can tell. It looks like they might have used a slightly smaller bit than they should have to drill out the holes for the neck, because there's some tear out on the upwards motion, which is usually from the screws being a little bit bigger and ripping the hole open as they go in. Again, these are small things in the manufacturing process that don't really affect the overall guitar, but just pointing things out as I notice them. The holes on the body look fine. Neck pocket's pretty clean. Again, no stress marks or anything like that. It is painted, so I can't actually tell, like I was hoping, what kind of wood they were using. Let me clean this up a little bit. Okay, so I can't tell what wood it was used because it was painted. If it wasn't painted, I might be able to tell by the grain type, but even that I'm not an expert on. I would just be guessing. So everything else here looks pretty solid in the neck pocket. That neck was really tight, which you don't always see in these guitars. There's also a really rough edge. Where are you? There on the neck. Not that it would ever really bother you when it's put into the guitar, but again, just a finishing issue. You can see that the other side is pretty smooth in comparison. Go ahead and put that back in. Yeah, that's a pretty good fit. All right, so let's go ahead and put that neck plate back on, and I'll come to you guys after I've put the guitar completely back together with some final thoughts. All right, so the guitar is back together. I'm going to give you guys my final thoughts on this guitar for a beginner. I'm going to point out just what I think was bad and then what was good. So first of all, the only thing that makes this guitar kind of scary for a beginner would be the buzzing at the 5th fret because the 6th fret is too high. That's not something that a beginner would know how to fix easily, and it's not something that can be easily fixed if it's not just a simple tap in with a rubber mallet or hammer, which actually let's test out right now. So I have my fret hammer here, or the hammer I use for frets. It's not really a fret hammer specifically. Like I said, this fret seems just a little tall, so I'm gonna try and get that to sit in a little bit better. Okay, so this would be the only thing that I would be worried about, right? The beginner's not gonna know exactly how to handle this situation, but it does seem like that fixed. Nope, still a little high. Really just on the low E section. It does feel a little bit better though, so that's good. Okay, just tapping it in is not a big deal. It definitely looks seated a lot better. Okay, so what does it need? It needed that. That was the scariest thing, and honestly, if that's all it is, it's pretty simple. If it needs a fret leveling or even a spot leveling, that's something that you have to take it to somebody to fix or know what you're doing to fix. The other thing it needs is, it's not terrible, but I'm definitely feeling some sharp fret ends. Now, this is not enough to need like a complete fret dressing, but what I would do is I would take a micro mesh stick and I would go over the edges and I'd go over the tops of the frets until they're all shiny. That should take care of the edges and take care of the tops so that everything's good. The nut needs to be cut down just a little bit. The grooves need to go down for the strings to be able to sit well enough for someone to play the 1st fret. This is something that I see on every beginner guitar though, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a $200 or $250 guitar. I see these issues pretty much everywhere. Honestly, my headless Ibanez Quest that I had about a year ago, the nut was worse than this. And it had a bad fret just like the 5th fret on this is dead. One of the higher strings would fret out at, I think, fret 3. And that was a $1,000 guitar when I bought it brand new. And I had to do that work. And for me, it wasn't that much work either. It was maybe an hour's worth of labor to fix those issues. And that's a little bit longer than it probably took. But I still had to fix those issues on a very expensive guitar. And this is fine, right? A beginner might have an issue with that 5th fret, but everything else is going to be okay. So that's good. That's good news for a beginner. Okay, the electronics seem to be pretty stable and fine. Didn't notice any issues when testing that earlier. Tuners have a pretty good ratio. They're a little loose, maybe some tightening around these bolts, but again, that's something that most people would have to do anyway, and that's really not that complicated. So I think as a recommendation for beginners and my students specifically, I think this is not a bad option. The fact that it has a manufactured fretboard, which is kind of an interesting texture, means that the frets, once they are polished and everything, they probably won't come out of the fretboard very much, if ever. Usually what you notice is sometimes heat will still cause the movements of the frets, because anything that heats up or cools down will not necessarily expand and contract like the wood, but could cause the frets to come out. So everything here seems like it's pretty solid for a beginner. And if someone's asking me what guitar should I get, I think the STRICH is a pretty good option. Again, speaking of another relatively inexpensive guitar, I have a headless guitar back there that I bought for around $300 on sale. Normally retails for around $400. The fret issues on that were horrendous. I actually bought 2 of them. The first one was worse. The pickups were bad and the frets were bad. And I had to do all the work to fix all of that. The first one took me about 3 hours to fix up. This one took me about an hour and a half to redo all the frets. So if you're looking for your first guitar, this seems like a solid option because there's not a whole lot wrong with it. And what is wrong with it is either personal preference or fixable relatively easily. Okay, real quick before the video is actually over, I just wanted to point out that I did tap in on camera the 5th fret, or sorry, the 6th fret of the guitar that was buzzing when playing the 5th fret on low E. And it's still buzzing a little bit, but it is completely playable for a beginner now. So that means that the tool ended up cost around $7 to fix the issue, and it should be good. It's in tune. I used the strings that they sent with it, the 9-42s, or at least that's what they said, and they seem to be working just fine. So the only thing that really needs to be touched up now, and this will go into the maintenance video I'm going to do with this guitar, is I'm going to do a full setup, so it'll eventually have the nut slots filed down, the frets will be polished, as well as the ends, which are snagging just a little bit, cleaned up. Thank you so much for watching this video, and thank you again to STRICH for sending out this guitar for me to look at. It takes a lot of confidence, or just being able to take the criticism if something is wrong. And I like to try and be as honest as possible about the instrument. And there are a couple issues, and maybe they'll come back and fix them. But honestly, if they didn't, it's still a pretty solid instrument for the price. And as everybody's been saying, look at that beautiful metal red color. So, again, thank you for watching. Thank you to STRICH. If you're interested in this guitar, check the link in the description down below. It doesn't help me out, but they'll be able to see that you guys like the video and we're interested in the guitar. And if you have any questions, I answer pretty much every single comment on my videos, so feel free to reach out and let me know if you have any questions about the instrument. And I'll see you guys next time.